It's the most common advice out there. Pick and choose your battles. What about not picking any battles? When you do that, you end up having more time and energy to actually win the war. You're listening to the Bear in Mind Podcast, episode 155.
A podcast that breaks it down so you can break the cycle for good. Now, your host, Tara Rama, but you can call her T.
Whether you're miserable at work or miserable with your kids, that was the advice I got. Pick and choose your battles. Pick and choose your battles with your boss. Pick and choose your battle with your kids. And I think that there is still some wisdom in it. But I also think that it's also a bunch of crap. And when you are so busy trying to decide which battles that you're going to face, you're going to handle in whatever situation it is, when you're going to decide to discipline your kids on something or not discipline them, there is always this like, well, what do I do here? What do I do here? And notice how much decision making you have to make in each of these kind of battles. And do I handle this here? Do I not handle it here? What do I do? And it's never really clear. At least I found that this advice doesn't come with a lot of clarity when you're talking about dealing with other people in any situation. And I think it actually, when I looked at the option of not picking any battles, and this is when I learned this from my coach, is that when you don't pick any battles, my first thought actually, when I was told this was like, oh no, I'm just avoiding, which I can be really good at that, avoiding, not doing anything. But that's not actually what that means, not picking battles. It means that in all of these little situations that you have in life, I'm going to use kids as an example, is that there's constant stuff coming at you. And they know your triggers really well. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to handle this, I'm not going to handle that. And there's so much exhaustion in that there is also an option to see none of it as a problem. A blatant, there is no battle, there is nothing going on here, I'm not going to argue with this situation. And notice how freeing that can be. And there's also probably a little bit of anxiety. Oh, I can't let this happen. I can't let this happen. Just notice that those are the battles you're talking about. Oh, that's a battle. Oh, that's a battle. And your brain wanting to pick everything as a battle. As, oh no, this can't. Otherwise, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. And all of a sudden, you're going down this road of all of these things that are going to happen that actually don't end up happening. So when I was introduced this concept of, how about don't pick any battles? I thought, okay, am I supposed to avoid everything? And I had recently been talking in the past episodes about some of the things where when you manage your anger can escalate in your partner or in some of your most intimate relationships. When your anger is managed better, you handle it, you understand it better, sometimes the anger in your increases in that other person. And part of that was me deciding not to pick any battles with my husband. I decided, okay, he's going to do this, and I'm just going to solve it. And what that did is that something else even more scary came up. When you're not so busy focused on how all of these little things, and battles are basically everyone else's behaviors. That's just code for, do I handle this person's behavior or don't I? Do I address it? Do I confront it? Do I create conflict with this person's behavior? And when I decided not to do that, then a lot of stuff comes up that's not very pretty. It's a lot of thoughts about me. It's a lot of negative thoughts about myself. And that is kind of interesting because when you're so focused on picking that battle, you've decided you're going to choose that battle with your kid about this particular spill, with your partner about not cleaning up after themselves or something like that. You will find that when your energy and focus isn't so much on that battle, there's a lot of stuff going on in your head and you didn't even realize it. That was a bit scary for me to see. And I'm not selling you probably on why not pick battles. Because if all of this a sudden your brain has some space, then some stuff comes out of it. comes up that you didn't even realize was there. And when that stuff comes up, that's the stuff. That's the battle. That's the battle that wins the war. That's the battle that's going on in your head. It's all of that stuff that you're thinking about yourself that's probably not very pretty. You're probably thinking you're not worth it. You're not a good enough parent. You're not good enough at your job. You don't know how to juggle the two. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have stayed at home. Like all of those things come up in your head that you had not realized that you've just kind of been avoiding. Because it's a lot easier to go and pick that battle with somebody else than to look and say, okay, all of this stuff is going on. All of these judgments about myself are going on. And there can even be some judgments about your parents in there, judgments you have about your relationships, judgments that you have about your children where you're like, oh, I can't think my kids are awful. Because at some point, all parents think that at some point. And that's the stuff we don't want to look at. But that battle alone, all of that stuff that comes up in our head that we don't want to focus on is going to get you to win the war. And winning the war is just having the kind of life, intentional life that you want to have. That could involve all of the goals, losing weight, stop yelling, making more money, all of those things that you want to do intentionally and get that done. That stream of stuff that comes in your head constantly that you put away because you're picking and choosing battles all on the outside does not get clarity on what it is that you want and how you want to navigate your life. And I want to take it a notch further because it can seem like, oh, pick and choose our battles, but what about some of society's bigger battles? What about sexism and racism? And I also believe that this is true. And because at first I also didn't. So I was like, okay, what about the really big problems that we have? What about the really big battles? And I decided I wasn't going to pick and choose battles on necessarily sexism and racism with people that I encounter on a day-to-day basis. I said, okay, if I'm in a social conversation, do I address certain things? And I do sometimes. So I have my limits and I do address some things. But there are remarks made. And I have an example. It just happened last week. I was at a language exchange thing and we were practicing the language. All of us are not from this country. And then there was a negative comment made about, oh, the immigrants that come to this country. And I'm kind of looking at all of us like, we're all immigrants. So now we use the word, expat. We come to this country. Some of us are here permanently. And we're talking about people of color. And then they saw me, then they looked at me like, oh, well, I mean people that don't have a lot of money. Well, then that person became clearer in their message. They're referring to people that don't have a certain level of income rather than associating it with attributing it to how somebody looks. It's about their income level. And in such battles as these, oftentimes, I allow the person to figure out where their brain is going just by being present and just by looking them in the eye and saying, what is it you have to say? Sometimes I don't even have to say words. But I am also choosing not to pick the battle in my head about, well, this person is being prejudiced and having all of those judgments because really, what is going on in my head that's preventing me from focusing on the things that I want to focus on? And guess what? At a language exchange, I'm focused on practicing the language. And that detracts you from getting to where you want to be. There are going to be always somebody saying something that maybe goes against, and you get to decide if you want to address it with that person. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. But I also operate from the philosophy that this is not the battle where I'm meant to fight for sexism and for racism. A lot of that is about getting your voice heard through policy, about getting your voice heard through policies that are even closer to you. I'm not talking about just governmental policies. Sometimes that's policies at your children's school. Sometimes it's voicing that at the Parents Association. And that's a battle, changing some of that. Having that focus on this is important to me. Because if you're fighting out all these little fires everywhere, whether that's kids' comments, social comments that you don't like, the way people behave on the street, you have very little time and energy to focus on the things that really matter to you, on the things that you want. And you can only know that when there is space in your head and you're not going around trying to put out all of these little fires. Oh, that person said that. Oh, my kid behaved like that. I need to address that. Oh, my husband's doing that. That'll cause that. When you're so focused on the kind of like these little things that keep nagging at you, you lose clarity in what it is that you want. And we all want something. It doesn't mean it has to be big. It doesn't mean that you want to star in a film. That's not what I'm talking about. We all want something because we're human. And everyone else in this world is going to try to distract you from that, from you trying to achieve what it is that you want. It can be a serene life. And then everyone's going to come and offer you a learning opportunity, and you get to decide if you want to pick and choose the battle. But I also want to say, pick no battles. Start from there. Pick no battles and see what comes up for you. And that'll give you a little bit of that clarity to see, what are my priorities? What is it that I really want to focus on? I really want to change the bullying policy in my school. And that gets you to winning the war and not putting out little fires everywhere. That's all I have for you this week. I'll check back with you next.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.